They call it targeting, a quiet epidemic hiding in plain sight, whispered about in online forums, dismissed by officials, and lived in terror by the people who insist they're experiencing it. Break-ins without evidence, surveillance no one can prove, voices, impulses, and sensations that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere. Tonight, Strange Planet returns to one of its most unsettling frontiers, the world of targeted individuals, TIs. And joining me is a man whose work ignited a global conversation, Dr. John Hall, physician and author of A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America and Guinea Pigs, Technologies of Control. His books argue that non-consensual experimentation and electronic harassment are no longer the realm of science fiction, but the quiet evolution of modern surveillance. But this time, our focus is not theoretical. It's the case of Benjamin Conine, who joined me recently on this podcast, a listener who reached out in desperation, convinced he is the target of advanced harassment, manipulation, and psychological intrusion. His story is raw, immediate, and disturbingly consistent with patterns Dr. Hall has documented for over a decade. Now, if you missed Ben's appearance on this podcast, here's the short version. Ben says his phone, his computer, his online accounts, all of it were infiltrated beginning in 2023. Not just hacked, but inhabited. He described voice-to-skull messages synced with car alarms and TV ads, unexplained electromagnetic spikes in his home, and a level of digital stalking that felt less like trolling and more like surveillance tradecraft. He believes the machinery behind it all resembles a modernized version of the Finders, a hybrid of trafficking, intelligence, and psychological manipulation, operating in the shadows of fusion center infrastructure. It's a shocking claim, but it's one he backs with timelines, screenshots, logs, and a level of detail that's hard to ignore. And if you haven't heard Benjamin's interview yet, do yourself a favor and go back after tonight's show and listen with new ears. Because once you hear what Dr. Hall has to say about the mechanics behind this kind of targeting, Ben's story sounds less like an anomaly and more like a warning. Dr. John Hall, great to see you again. Welcome to Strange Planet. How are you?
Oh, great, Richard. Great show. Yeah, I did have a chance to watch the interview you did with Ben, and very striking as we were talking earlier off camera. If you read my first book, A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America, it basically chronicles the same story of a girl, an ex-fiance of mine, that went through the same thing. And his targeting almost looks like they based it upon what this group did to this girl in my first book, almost to a T.
Wow. And so again, when you look at the pattern in Ben's timeline, device infiltration, synchronized cues, escalating psychological intrusion, what stands out to you as consistent with, known targeting methodologies?
Well, a lot has changed since you and I had fought this fight 10 years ago. The way it's done is not necessarily through electronically infiltrating or hacking into your electronics. It's hacking into your brain. And once somebody can hear your thoughts in real time, then it's really hard to have a private email or a private text or a private conversation, because we have a thing called pre-vocal thought. And anytime you're going to text somebody or you're going to put an email in or talk to somebody, you're thinking about that vocality before it actually occurs. That's one of the ways that we've worked with, paraplegics and, injured warriors, using brain-computer interfaces to be able to control limbs with just thought. You can pick up on that pre-vocal thought. So you can think about making a hand move, or you can think about making an arm move. So it's technology that was already known. What was so striking with his story is it's consistent with pretty much the known technology. And when you hear him talk in his interview, he figured it out pretty early on. I mean, a lot of targets think it's, Jesus or God or angels or demons. They kind of go down that pathway. He figured out pretty quickly, just like the earliest form of this technology was actually in the Utah State Prison in the 80s. when it was being used experimentally on men in a cell. And they said the same thing Ben said. I recognized immediately that the voices I was hearing in my head were responding appropriately to my thoughts back. And that's why it's kind of loosely termed synthetic telepathy. So when somebody talks to you, you can hear it and you can think your thoughts back and they hear it. He had a lot figured out. I was really impressed. Most targeted individuals don't get it figured out to that point. So it is designed to simulate psychosis or schizophrenia. So for your listeners that are going, well, this is obviously somebody that's crazy and suffering from schizophrenia, it's designed to make you look that way. It's not typically being done by a government agency to most people, although since we work together, I've worked with a lot of whistleblowers from the Reconnaissance Office, CIA, NSA, that are being targeted by their agencies. But most people are being targeted by a private investigative group that some has a member or an owner that has clearance to access these technologies. They do exist. If you want the new term for it, it's not targeted anymore. It's called Havana syndrome or anomalous health incidents.
And well, you sort of alluded to who might be behind this, but I mean, why would they get access to this type of technology? I mean, what level of sophistication are we talking about here with these individuals behind this?
With well, the individuals behind it, most of them you don't have to be very sophisticated, believe it or not. It's a private sector technology that's been leased out to government agencies for legitimate intelligence use. But anybody with a clearance, from one of those agencies, past or present, can actually access it. And what we found in doing the research, at least in Texas, is it was a handful of private investigative groups that were owned and operated by former FBI and former DOD individuals that were accessing it. I do know the name of the company that created it. It's not Raytheon or Lockheed Martin. It's none of the names that you would recognize. I can't give you the name right now because I'm doing my own research into this company. But I will tell you this, that I met one of the people who works for the CEO of this particular company. And he said straight out, he goes, there's three things we can do. He said, we can hurt you with directed energy weapons wherever we want to hurt you. We can make you hear voices. We can give you a headache severe enough that you'll want to put a bullet in yourself, or we can vaporize you entirely. And he went on to say that the CIA actually owes them about $12 billion in use fees that they're kind of upset about getting. So for any of your listeners that are kind of doubting this technology, it's being used on our own diplomats here in Canada. You guys had people at the embassy in Cuba that were victimized as well, and actually had some success with a lawsuit against the Canadian government for not taking care of them. At the top, both of our governments know exactly what this technology is, and they're even denying treatment and denying just coming forward with it with their own victims. So
there seems to be also a level of coordination at local levels. For example, in Ben's story, he was actually confined to a mental institution against his will. I mean, it was not voluntary. There was such a level of coercion here. Police were called to his place a number of times. I think in one incident, police barged into his apartment and roughed him up and hauled him away in handcuffs. How are these individuals or groups behind this working with local police, hospitals, and so forth?
I'm not so sure that it's always that they're truly working in conjunction with the hospitals and the local police. I know here in Texas, I mean, it's kind of comforting. I've actually had several victims that called police. The police came and said, I believe you. I've heard of this technology before. I don't know how to stop it, but we're not going to take you in because everything you're describing, even when I wrote my first book, I turned to a former FBI agent that ran a private investigative service in San Antonio. And his first words to me said, is the girl or you in any federal government problems? Because what you're describing is satellite-based surveillance, which is kind of a misnomer because it's actually a weapon system, not just a surveillance system. And I said, no, she shows apartments and I'm a physician. And he goes, well, everything you're describing is what typically they use in foreign lands when the CIA is attacking somebody there, or if you're in government trouble, as maybe a civil outlier, or a revolutionary or something in the States. So I think in some areas there might be some police that are part of it, because it certainly seems that way with some of the stories and other places that I've heard from targeted individuals. But more than that, I think that the people that are doing the electronic harassment, they know how to manipulate the system. They know when you turn to the police and you say, well, I'm having voices in my head, turnkey response to that is, well, it's a mental illness problem and we need to get you into a hospital before you turn violent or anything like that. So I think there are instances where the local municipalities are working with the people doing the targeting, but I think most of the time they're taking advantage of a situation. These are such rehearsed scenarios that it's been going on for so long that they know exactly what the response is going to be when you turn to your family members complaining of this, or when you turn to the police complaining of this. That it's kind of the targeted individual's response to the technology that sets off the rest of the spiral downward. And it happens kind of all on its own without much more input from the people doing the targeting, unfortunately.
One of Ben's most explosive claims is that the operation resembles a modern extension of a group, a cult, if you will, called the Finders. This was a group that was involved in trafficking, surveillance. There seemed to be some connection with the CIA. I believe the CIA was called in to investigate the Finders, and the story just quickly went away, as if perhaps someone in the CIA was involved, or perhaps it was the FBI. From your perspective, what are there some historical, modern parallels that exist between his description and the covert programs that you've documented?
Oh yeah. It's basically a continuation of MK Ultra. The early mind control studies were so successful that, especially for a government agency, you don't do a bunch of research and find it successful just to put it away. As technology improves, you continue on with those studies. Now, with MK Ultra, we were able to find a lot of the background financing, which is what allowed us to know exactly how bad it was. And that was in both of our countries. A lot of the MK Ultra studies were done on Canadians, unfortunately. Especially at McGill University was a hot center for a lot of those studies.
Yeah.
All they really did is change the moniker and hide it a little better. Now it's still being forwarded out there to private entities. As I said, the technology that's being used currently to do this, it's not owned by the government. Now the research was funded by the government through Black Ops funding, but it's a industrial military company that's doing it. It's a company that they make airplanes, they make satellites, they make armored cars, they do military technology. Now, not just anyone can get that technology. You have to have a clearance through the government to access it. But it's a continuation of pre-existing mind control studies. It's a continuation of MK Ultra. And initially, we were checking people with radio frequency scans and MRIs and CTs to check for implants. Everybody thought that you must be implanted, but in talking to the people that from this company, there's no implant required, unfortunately, to do this, and they can actually zoom in and read the writing on your ballpoint pen on your pocket. So,
And the question we always ask, why Ben and his wife, we should point out, she's being targeted as well, as if they're trying to, drive them apart. She's become violent towards him in some instances. But why are they targeting this couple?
this is a very well rehearsed program, and let's put it this way: the way the technology is doled out to the individual users or the groups that are allowed to use it. whether it's a PI group or a counterintelligence group or whatever it is in your particular state, mostly private investigative groups. But they basically are allowed to use this technology however they want to use it. So some focus on using it for sex trafficking. Some focus on, maybe targeting a specific cultural or gender group, that happens to be their bias. Other people are targeted by people that are claiming to be God or Jesus and do it. They have a religious scenario behind it. But one thing that always works, and they figured out this early on, is if you have a couple and you control the female, but you target the male will almost do whatever he will do to try to protect female, as any of us would. Um, and in saying that, just so your listeners know, there's a difference between controlled and being targeted. If I put a voice in your head that sounds like me talking about your vest and your shirt and how you look, or berating you like that, you're going to sense that as a foreign voice in your head, and I'm harassing you, and it's harassment. If I put a voice in your head that sounds like your voice, your pre-vocal speech, what you hear when you read a book or when you're thinking about talking to somebody, or when you're thinking about your next statement, well, you'll act on that voice as a thought, and then that becomes control. And if you've ever seen somebody that's totally controlled, they are totally controlled. You can put a red dot on a white wall and ask them, do you see the red dot? And they'll say, no, it's a white wall. I mean, and from everything he described, it sounds like they're controlling his wife to basically target him. Now, it may be a group that had used her for sex trafficking, maybe, or tried to in the past, or he may be the primary target and they're just using her to get to him. But I mean, that part of it, he's kind of fallen in all the common pitfalls. He's reached out for help, being honest, which got him, locked away in a mental ward. And then now if she's being controlled, the way the girl I wrote about was being controlled, I couldn't get a breakthrough from her until she had actually gotten pregnant. She wasn't sure who she'd gotten pregnant from because she was being sexually trafficked. So she went and had abortion and then started hemorrhaging after the abortion. That finally brought her around to admit to me that she was being controlled. And I mentioned this in the book. I asked her, I said, is letting yourself being drugged with rohypnol and being used sexually, I mean, why are you doing this? I mean, you can fight this through the police. And she said, I've got to do whatever I've got to do to protect my parents. They're threatening to kill my parents. So, I mean, that's kind of how they're controlled, not only through the electronics, but they're controlled through threats as well. And the unfortunate advice that I did give to Ben is you reach a point where rather than saving her, you just about have to focus on saving yourself. Especially if she's controlled to the point where she's actually more of a detriment to him than a help. Now, what makes it really difficult in his position is she's pregnant.
Yes.
So, I mean, I really feel for him. He's not crazy. He is being targeted. And I'm not real sure what best advice to give to him in that scenario.
He's collected evidence of digital infiltration and again, these unexplained electromagnetic effects. As someone who's seen many, let's say, fabricated and many genuine cases, what criteria do you determine whether his documentation holds, let's say, forensic value?
Well, that's kind of where the problem really lies with this technology is you can prove the stalking when it starts. Now, every one of these cases starts with on the ground stalking. They have to get some biometric parameters on you. As it was explained to me, once they have the satellite systems, the cameras on you and everything, then they will find whatever markers they need to continue watching you. You don't have to have an implant. It can be your fillings. It can be your gait. It can be facial recognition. It can be a lot of things. Now, the stalking is where you can actually get your best evidence because they will stalk you. And I mean, and it's organized stalking. They're with you all day, every day, 24 hours a day, sitting outside your work, sitting outside your door, breaking in and out of your house. That's when you can really get your physical evidence. In most states now have anti-stalking laws to deal with that. I was responsible for getting it changed here in Texas. Before, to get a stalking case, you had to be injured. Now, if you see the same person following you around more than 24 hours, you can start a stalking investigation. I actually got that passed here about a decade ago. And it did shut down a lot of the targeting here because it has to start with physical stalking all the time. Certainly, if he can prove that his computers have been hacked and all of that, he can. The problem in our country, and it probably with your country as well, is the psychiatric community. It doesn't matter whether you bring in documentation from Havana syndrome people, my books, all the proof you want to put. The minute you say, I'm hearing voices, they actually turnkey start to diagnose you. And there's a million ways to put voices in somebody's head. I've got several technologies at my house that I can do it with.
Wow. And that the early iteration, I guess, was what, nearly 60 years ago, voice to skull technology, right? So who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, you tell me, how are they doing it today?
It's actually done. It's bone conduction hearing, and it's done with an electronic signal. They can beam a waveform to your brain. Your brain will entrain that waveform. That's how they manipulate your moods and your feelings, and can make you depressed, or make you angry, or make you controlled. It's kind of interesting the way they do the sex trafficking when they're dealing with women that they want to sex traffic. And in the case I wrote about, this girl was being, they were putting rohypnol, a date rape drug, in her tea bags, in her frozen food, in certain drinks. And then they would electronically control her to eat or drink the substance that they put the date rape drug in. Well, once she was sedated, there were men paying money to come over and rape her. And that's kind of the way they do it, for sex trafficking. Now with his wife, they're kind of controlling her to be his adversary, which I know they had a little period of a breakup, but whenever you see somebody that's basically reporting their spouse and trying to get them in trouble, but they're not leaving their spouse, right now, whether she's witting or unwitting, she's part of his problem. So, I mean, like I said, I'm not real sure what he's going to do about that. So,
Ben thinks he was either selected for experimentation or intimidation. In your opinion, what makes someone a selectable target? Like, what are the factors? Is it personal? Is it demographic, geographic? What places an individual on their radar?
it varies from group to group that's actually using the technology. The group in Texas, and it was one group in Texas, and they were working in multiple cities in Texas, and their whole thing was sex trafficking. They were looking for women that they could control and then make money on doing the sex trafficking. Now there was a group in San Francisco that was specifically targeting gay men, and it was hateful based targeting. They had a problem with homosexuality, and I mean the gay men that were being targeted there were being, severely attacked with directed energy weapons, not just the mind control. Um, in his case, now I believe he did go to Thailand to meet his wife, is what I recall in the story. Um, a lot of people may not realize this, but at least in our country, I don't know about yours, but when you vacation in Thailand and come back, that puts you on all kind of government lists. Because there's a lot of people that go there for sexual vacations,
Yes.
specifically to be with young women or young boys. So the minute you go there as an American, you're automatically, on a flight list. That might have been what got him on there. And then once they saw that his wife was controllable, then they knew they could target him. Now, in a lot of other cases, Richard, it's completely random. Somebody that has access to the technology saw you in the grocery store shopping, took a liking to your wife, or chose to target you for one reason or another. Sometimes it's purely random. Now, sometimes you're a whistleblower. Like I said, I've worked with people from pretty much all agencies, and I've had several of the members that were victims of Havana syndrome contact me against a gag order. to basically find out what it was. Because, the CIA tried to say that it was all in their head and it was anxiety. Then they said it was pesticides, permethrin from spraying the crickets. And then they said, well, it was the crickets themselves. I mean, they came out with a bunch of different things, even though UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, said there's white track damage on MRI and it looks like it's some type of energy weapon. But the CIA to this day is denying that.
Not to give anyone any ideas who might be listening or watching, but I mean, you're a whistleblower. You've written about this. You've been an activist. We worked on a TV show together on this very topic. Why haven't we been targeted?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you have. I have been. Now my targeting after the books came out came with, medical board, reports. My house was being broken into. I had bullets fired through the bedroom on my window. I was called and basically told, you need to settle down on writing the books and doing your interviews, and or we're going to basically run you out of town, run you out of the country. But my family's here and I'm not going anywhere. But yeah, I mean that once I came out with the books, that's when my targeting started. But even like every other physician, this was a girl that I knew that came to me that I wrote about. I was engaged to her, and then we broke up, and then her targeting started, and she came to me and said, I'm hesitant to talk to anybody about this, but I'm hearing voices. I got people following me everywhere we go." And I said, let me do a little counter intel, with you. And sure enough, I mean, the same cars that were following her started following me. All of the plates came back to a particular PI group that was owned by a former FBI agent. Yeah, he basically called and told me. He said, and this is what I told Ben. They said, if you want to help this girl, we're going to make her the carrot that pulls the cart. We want you to stop all of this and get out of town. So I mean, it's no question that it happens.
Ben frames this as a spiritual battle as much as a technological one. Given everything you've seen across hundreds of cases, do you agree? I mean, are we dealing with is it purely technological, or is there a deeper philosophical, even a metaphysical dimension to what's happening to people like Ben?
Well, let's put it this way. In my second book, I opened each chapter with a Bible verse, that kind of correspond to what the chapter was about. So, I mean, being a Christian myself, I mean, I do kind of see it as spiritual warfare. To be clear with your listeners, spiritual warfare doesn't necessarily mean demons are coming after you, but it means that people that are being influenced by maybe a demonic ideology or a demonic thought process, or at least non-Christian process, are doing the targeting. Nobody that's a decent person is just going to want to torture somebody else for no reason, and that's exactly what these people do. Now, they have kind of created their own prison, and I've talked to some of the people that do the targeting as well, and they'll tell you the same thing. Ben was right when he said it seems like it's done in shifts. It's not the same 3 people or 4 people that are watching you 24 hours a day. That's impossible. When you're under live surveillance, they do it in shift work, usually 3 people doing 12-hour shifts, because you're even watched all night, because one of the things they love to do is sleep deprive you. It makes you look that much more crazy when you go to the authorities. If you've been sleep deprived for 3 or 4 days and haven't had a shower, and you're worried and you're scared, and it makes you look crazier, which is the goal. Or the other way they do it is they put you on what's called a chat box. And the chat box basically is recording your own thoughts back to you with a slightly different voice to it. So you don't recognize them as your thoughts. You recognize them as a foreign voice in your head, and you start answering back to that. For people who have never experienced it, I hope you don't. But what they will do is basically riddle you with pejoratives all night long while you're laying. And it's sad because the people that are going through it know damn well that it's not the natural thought process that a schizophrenic hears. Schizophrenics are actually hearing their own thoughts. This is somebody talking to you like basically through a CB radio, except the CB radio is in your head. You can hear the people having shift change. This girl would tell me, she goes, well, right now somebody just brought tacos in for breakfast, and the night people are leaving and the new people are coming on, you know. And once she actually came and stayed at my place, I actually could hear them too coming through vibrations in a ceiling fan. And kind of the way this technology works, when this energy signal gets beamed down to you, anything that produces vibration can amplify that into an audible tone, whether that's a jet passing through the sky, leaves rustling. Tell you what actually amplifies it really good is a ceiling fan, a bathroom vent fan, or a aquarium aerator bubbling. Anything that causes some vibration in the air, if you slowly listen carefully, you'll hear that electronic signal get converted to an auditory, an acoustic signal, and then you can hear them. And usually it'll sound like voice patterning at first. It'll like an AM radio that's slightly off tune, kind of a what, and then after you really, really tune in and hone in, you can hear it. So that's the sad part with the technology. Is I've even had some of the targeted people go, well, I'm hearing people talk to me, so I must be crazy. I need to go see a psychiatrist. Trust me, schizophrenics don't think that way.
I really would like to get Ben some help, and I have a series of questions here to that end. I mean, what is the first actionable step he could take to protect himself or to, I don't know, lessen this torture?
As long as his wife is going to keep reporting him as crazy, and the more he talks to her about that and tries to basically get her to his side, I think the more she's going to be damaged to him. So, as much as I mean, I'm a family guy. I don't know if we haven't talked in a while, but even at my age, I've got a 4-year-old daughter and another one on the way.
Oh, God bless you. God bless you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm all about family, and for me to say this, it destroys me to say it, but they may need some time apart, for him to basically heal himself and let her deal with whatever she's dealing with. And I don't think they're going to harm her, or they would have already. That might actually do them some good, and at least let him fix himself. And I told him, I said, I can help you break free from this, but you're not going to do it as long as you're trying to protect her. Because the more you talk to her about it and the more you listen to them, the deeper you're going to be. So, kind of the first step is you've got to break that communication link. The way they keep track of you is through the link. I mean, the way to look at it is, let's say me and you basically had shortwave receivers in us, and I was able to shortwave connect with you, there in Canada, and me down here in San Antonio, Texas, and that link never ended. Well, at any time you wake up, you would be able to just kind of roll over, hit the radio and go, "Hey, John, how are you doing?" I'm always going to be there. That is how they track you. There's not a device in you typically, although we have found devices in people. Typically, it's not done that way, and I don't think it's done that way in him unless he knows he's been injected with something. You've got to break that link, and there's some ways to do it. Some people are able to do it just by focusing on not answering telepathically back when they berate you. There's some devices. Actually, there's a little device called an aftershocks. They're earbuds that you use for music. What I've done is I'm working with a developer here in Texas that develops binaural beats. So that way we can get both of your hemispheres of your brain working in conjunction again. Just so your listeners understand why that's important. The way this is done, it's a frequency beamed into your head, and one hemisphere of your brain picks up and trains that frequency. The other one doesn't. And when those two hemispheres try to regulate each other, they spit out an interference frequency, and the interference frequency is what you're tracked with. And that's also the way they're able to find you on a global map, a three-dimensional map. And that's why putting your back against concrete or something doesn't work. I mean, it's ELF, it goes right through the earth. So you have to break that link. And one of the ways to do it is to interrupt that link with a similar frequency with binaural beats. So basically, if you can get both hemispheres working at the same frequency again, then you're no longer spitting out an interference frequency. And that's actually a design that was actually designed by the military to monitor pilots for hallucinations. And that way, whenever that interference frequency would start beaming back out of a pilot's head, they could see what their EEG is doing. You can glean the EEG from that. And if they're hallucinating, you could zap them back awake so when they're flying these long sorties. So it's a long known technology. It's just being used for a really horrible reason now.
Okay, so just to recap, he needs to it's temporarily at least separate from his wife, break off that connection. Hopefully it's temporary. And then these earbuds that emit these binaural beats. Yeah.
Well, we can formulate him a binaural beat program that you listen through bone conduction earphones. They're called aftershocks. And you listen through the bone, which is the same way the existing frequency is targeting them. And that way, it kind of mixes up what they're getting as a signal back. And it helps you break free. Now, some people can break free all on their own, just through meditation, through, not listening and not responding back. But the problem that most targeted individuals fall into is they think if they listen to every word that these people say and try to listen to what's going on in the background, because like I said, it's a link. You're listening to somebody that may be in your city or maybe in another state or in another country. So the temptation is to listen to everything they say, to try to glean as much knowledge about it as you can, to see what's behind them. Like with the girl that I wrote about in my first book, the time that I heard them, you could actually, it was coming through the ceiling fan in my bedroom, but you could hear a freight train behind the people that were talking. You could hear a train. The place where they were at was near a train. So, I mean, and that's what's so enticing is you want to listen to every little bit. Well, the more you listen, the more you're entrained, and then the more you're attacked with everything else that comes with it. So we need to get him on some aftershocks with a good binaural beat program. And once he starts listening to that and can teach himself to not respond back, then they can't find him on the grid.
Is there any way for a victim to positively identify the source of the harassment, or is the system designed to make that impossible?
It not only is it designed to make it impossible, what they want you to do is blame your mom or dad or a family member, because when you go and you act out on a family member, that's a one-way trip to the psychiatrist and then a one-way trip to the hospital. Or they want you to think it's a neighbor. Well, imagine when you go running over to your neighbor's house, complaining, bitching at them about attacking you with microwave energy. Well, they're going to call the police. The police are going to come. Even if they believe that you're being targeted, they're still going to see you as a danger to your neighbor. So, I mean, like I said, they have orchestrated these down to a T. They know exactly what's going to happen. A lot of times they're controlling your family members before they start actually harassing the intended victim, because they know who you're going to reach out to.
What about jerry rigging some sort of a Faraday cage? They used to recommend that. Does that even work anymore, given the advancement in technology?
If you can actually rig yourself up a Faraday cage that's research quality, early on in a group called ISA Act that I worked with, we actually took a group of people to Belgium to an anechoic chamber that, I mean, it locks out everything. And they were better. People did get better, when they're in that chamber. Now, just using some Faraday fabric and stuff like that you can DIY, it's not going to happen. As a matter of fact, the question you're asking, our government has asked it. The government puts out white papers to the private industry doing research, and they're looking for ways to protect their own personnel and equipment from this. That's why when you see the people who control the drones that we use, like in Afghanistan and Iraq and all of that, they're in shipping containers. They're in steel shipping containers. And it's not because they're afraid of being bombed, they're afraid of electronics.
Wow. Is there any legitimate route through the legal system for someone like Ben? Or, again, are these operations simply beyond the reach of courts and law enforcement?
The difficulty in it is, like I said, it's it's a civilian corporation that really is responsible for the technology. That technology is leased out to government agencies and probably leased out to anybody else that can afford it to pay for it. As I said, the CIA currently owes this company $12 billion. They're supposedly they're about to cut them off, from it until they pay up. So that's kind of where the problem lies, is finding enough proof, finding exactly how you're going to prove it's that company doing it. Even if you do spectral analysis, yeah, you're going to come up with all kinds of waveforms coming into your abode, but then you've got to prove to the police or have some kind of an expert proof to it that it is coming from someplace and meant to do you harm, that it's not a local radio station or a TV station, or EMF emanating from your microwave oven or from your TV. And that kind of gets into some of the aerial spraying stuff too. That's a big thing down here again. It's been denied for a long time, but now there's some really good proof and some really good studies coming out that they're spraying aluminum. Well, the aluminum they're spraying, they claim it's actually blocks sunlight and help lower the temperature. But the reality of it is they're spraying it to make the atmosphere more electronically valuable for this type of technology. So, I mean, it's still one of those things where, man, it's hard to prove. Let's put it this way. I'm talking to some of the Havana syndrome people. Most of them are using a lawyer named Mark Zaid. Mark Zaid is well known to represent in the DC area whistleblowers and stuff. Now, he also has a clearance with the CIA. So the people that can help you kind of are riding that fence between being part of the problem and being part of the solution. So, I mean, we're in a difficult spot at that point. And I don't know in the civilian world if we're ever going to have a collection of people with enough money to fund treating it. Now, I will say this: if you're from a military family or and somehow can find yourself on TRICARE, TRICARE actually is recognizing anomalous health incidents right now. If you're a military member or a military dependent and you're having any of this happen, you can go to your TRICARE doctor and say, I'm experiencing an AHI, and they'll give you the workup. Interestingly enough, you can find all that. I was actually given a copy of what the DoD is recommending to their doctors in evaluating AHI, which is targeting. It's just the government. It's not Havana syndrome anymore. It's AHI, anomalous health incidents. And nowhere in that workup are they scanning them or looking for implants. What they are doing is diffusion tensor imaging in the brain to identify white tract damage coming from the microwave energy. And what I would like to do is get everybody that's targeted in the civilian world, and if we could all get them diffusion tensor imaging, DTI scans, I think they're going to find all the same injury that we've seen in the Havana syndrome patients.
We had this Havana syndrome, went public, I don't know what, 8-9 years ago. It seems now it's in the public consciousness. Now it's on the radar, even for certain politicians. What is the future? I mean, are you hopeful that this is going to be a recognized problem, and will we see, I don't know, laws, legislation to help people with this? What's going to happen?
Well, we're kind of getting there. I mean, I was shocked when I saw that. I know a lot of your listeners are probably Canadian. TRICARE is the health insurance that you get when you retire from the military, get out of the military, or for military dependents. If you're not going to the Veterans Administration to get active VA care, usually they put you on TRICARE. And once they changed the name to anonymous health incidents, mainly because it started off as some people diplomats in Havana, Cuba. Then we had them in Vietnam. Then we had them in China. Then we had some in DC. And they all were showing the same signs. They said they were hearing tinnitus, which is, the first stage of this. All of this targeting, when you're targeted by this technology, it starts with ringing in the ears. The ringing in the ears then degrades to hearing somebody talk to you. The ringing and the tinnitus part of it is just them testing you. and basically getting you to accept the signal. But when I saw that you could actually go report this to your doctor now, well, it's a big step. Now, they still may tell you you're crazy and recommend psychiatric care, but they're backdoor admitting that the technology exists, that there's something there. Now, when we got Trump, was kind of hoping that maybe he would kind of open the door a little wider. Hopefully, he still will. At least in our country, the CIA and the Democratic Party work side by side. The CIA is the strong arm of the Democratic Party. So, once the Republicans kind of got in there, even though they're not much better, we kind of thought maybe there would be some open doors, and that was kind of one of them. So I'm still kind of hopeful because at least now we've got some government employees that have been targeted that we can refer to, and research that was done by University of Pennsylvania and McGill and some of the other universities in Canada to kind of point to and say, well, this was been happening in the civilian world for some time before it was ever called Havana syndrome, in an experimental fashion. I'm not so sure that any of it's experimental anymore. I think the technology is pretty well nailed down.
I know Ben is listening and watching this episode, and I believe that you two are communicating as well privately. But any message to Ben?
Just to hang in there. But I mean, I know you reached out to me. We haven't talked. Just so your listeners know, we haven't talked since we shot the show, really. And his story obviously gripped you. For you to take the time to actually send it to me, and I watched it, man, it was refreshing to see somebody that's actually being victimized by this to talk so succinctly and describe it so perfectly. He is, I don't know, without ever having read my books, he didn't even know who I was, which I was kind of shocked, but he is correct on every single bit of it, and he's not crazy. He's being victimized, and so is his wife. And I told him, and I hated to tell him this in our personal conversation, you got to save yourself, because somebody that's completely controlled, they have to hit a rock bottom on their own. And usually it takes a traumatic event to get out of that control. Right now, they're going to control her to keep destroying him. He's going to keep listening to him to try to figure out how to help her. And it's going to have a bad ending on both their parts. If they can break apart for a little bit and he can actually break free from the link, that may give her a chance to actually, be brought around. It's hard to convince somebody that's being controlled that they're not being controlled. I mean, and there's a million ways to control people. Even the press controls people here. I mean, look at the people that are continuing to get COVID vaccine booster shots. Even though they keep getting the disease. I mean, it's crazy. So,
Dr. Hall, how can folks get a copy of A New Breed: Satellite Terrorism in America and Guinea Pigs: Technologies of Control?
Amazon carries both my books. There's a new book that's going to be coming out here hopefully pretty soon. I was forced to do some redacting on. I've been working on it for about 5 years, and the government keeps on prolonging the redactions, but it's called The Fourth Branch. That will be out hopefully in 26. But if you're going to read anything, if you want to read a story that reads exactly like Ben's story, read A New Breed: Satellite Terrorism in America. It came out 15 years ago, 20 years ago now. It's his story that much longer ago. If you want to know about the technology, Guinea Pigs: Technologies of Control.
Dr. Hall, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.